What's up YouTube, I'm back with another great tutorial and this is what we're going to make today. But at first, big thank you for the massive support on my last videos, that really means a lot to me. And today I prepared the kind of dreamy trance project, all with Ableton stock plugins so everyone can rebuild it. But of course you can download the full project file, including all the samples and effect tracks I used, with a link in the description. And if you like this kind of content, make sure you follow me on my socials, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, that would help me a lot. And now, let's jump into the project. So for this project we are at 148 BPM and in the key of A major. And I built 3 different 8-bar loops for this project, all with a different technique, so that you get an idea how to came out of your 8-bar loop when you are stuck in your production. And the first 8 bars we have only the guitar and the kick and bass playing. And in the second 8-bar loop we have that vocal chop or vocal slice, which is the main element of this track and sets the vibe of this track. And in the third 8 bars, we have another variation of the vocals and with that call and response technique from the piano and the guitar. And a little build-up section at the beginning. So let's start with the low end, which is sounding like this. So as you heard, we have a very deep offbeat bass line, which have a lot of low frequencies in it, but it's still powerful enough to cut through the mix. And we have a very punchy kick with a very strong transient. And only the kick sounding like this. And the length of the kick is exactly 1/8 note here, so we don't get any problems with the bass line. But as you know, if your kick is longer than 1/8 note, you need to sidechain it with your bass line to avoid any problems with the phases. For the processing, I did nothing here except the utility in mono, because the kick already sounding very processed, and that's why I did no processing for the kick. For the bass line, I played around with Ableton's synthesizer, and I stopped with the melt here because I liked how the sub is sounding here. And I used 2 oscillators. The first one is the sub, pitched down 2 octaves, and the second one is the Fold FM, also pitched down 2 octaves here. And then I played around with the tone and with the shape of oscillator B. Then I linked the modulation envelope of both oscillators with the filter frequency, so that every time the note is playing, the filter opens, and I increased the attack time because I don't want a pluggy bass line. I want more of a pulsing bass line, and therefore I increased the attack time here. Let me turn off the processing here and bring it back step by step so that you can hear the difference. So only the melt is sounding like this. Then I added saturation for more texture. Then the war effect. And here I boosted a lot of the high frequencies, 20% of the mid frequencies, and 10% of the low frequencies. And because the last 4 notes here in the bass line are a bit more higher than the others, I had the feeling that there's one frequency which is too loud. So I used an EQ, did a low cut at the beginning for the very low frequencies, and then I took out a lot of the frequencies around 126 Hz, because on my real speakers, the last 4 notes was way too loud. And then I added a limiter, which is also only affecting the last 4 notes here. You can see it when I play it from the half. So I set the ceiling until only the last 4 notes are affected by the limiter, just to lower the gain a little bit. And at the end, of course, a utility in mono to avoid any phase issues. And then I used the glue compressor on the low end group with a long detect time and a very short release time, and set the sidechain filter to around 50 Hz here. And then I lowered the threshold until the needle is between 0 and 5 dB. And because I had the gain reduction after the threshold, I increased the gain at the end a little bit, so that the low end has the same loudness as before. So let's hear the low end without the glue compressor. And with. So it makes the low end more tighter and more powerful in the mix. So the drums in this genre are very simple. You don't need much. Just find good samples, and then your drums sounding like this. So very clean 909 open head and a clean clap. And for the second 8-bar loops, I added a closed head loop for more groove and variation in the drums. And I did not that much processing as well. For the clap, I only added a EQ to take out some low frequencies. And for the open head, I added a reverb with a short decay time to make the open head more white and bright. And then I took out some low frequencies we added with the reverb. And for the close head, same reverb as for the open head, but this time I reduced the dry wet knob here a little bit. For the main synths, I tried to build a realistic sounding guitar, and I found that Ableton default guitar sound, you can find that when you type in guitar in your search bar, and I played around with the settings here until the guitar sounding like this. And for the processing, I added a corpus effect, and what the corpus is doing, it simulates your sound playing in different objects. You can choose here from different objects, and I choose the pipe mode and give it a little bit of wetness here until it sounds more realistic. So without the corpus and with. So as you can hear, the corpus gives the sound really more body, and because of that, it's sounding more realistic. And then I added a compressor on peak mode because I had the feeling that the transient of the guitar is too loud. So I reduced the volume every time the note is playing with that compressor here. Without the compressor and with. So it controls the peaks of the guitar sound, that it's more balanced. Then I added a reverb and the echo just to have that dreamy feeling in the guitar. Nothing special here. And EQ at the end to take out the low frequencies. And with the auto filter, I modulated a high cut for the transition sounds and the build up. But we go through that later in the arrangement. And now the processed guitar sounding like this. The second synth in this project is a dreamy piano, and it's sounding like this. And I created that sound with wavetable, and I used two oscillators here. The first oscillator is a basic saw wave, and the second oscillator is a sine wave here. And then I assigned both amps in the matrix to the filter one frequency, like we did with the bassline before, so that every time the note's playing, we get that nice plucky sound. Increase the attack time a little bit here, so that the note is not too sharp. Then I added a delay and a reverb, nothing too special, and a EQ to take out the lows. And then you get that very simple, dreamy piano. So for the vocals, I used a technique called vocal slicing or vocal chopping, and you can do that with the Ableton Simpler. So try to find a good vocal sample, which is in the same key of your track, and then load it in your Simpler. And without the slice effect, the vocal sounding like this.
I just wanna go where you go tonight, baby, hold my hand.
And then you can click on the slice mode right here. And here you can choose between 4 different slice modes. The first one is the transient mode. On the transient mode, Ableton detects where the transients in your vocal samples are, and then make a cut for each transient. Second mode is the beat mode in the 4-bar loop or 1 bar. And in the region mode, you can choose how many cuts in the full length of your sample. So if you drag that all the way up to 46, you have 46 cuts in your vocal sample. And then you have the manual mode where you can make your own cuts in the vocal sample. But I used the transient mode and lowered the sensitivity to 81%. And what this does is when you lower the sensitivity, the cuts disappear. And then you can open your MIDI clip and play around with the different vocal slices until you find a nice pattern that fits your track. Take your time with that. This is really the fun part of this technique. And if nothing works, try to find another vocal sample and try again. And by the way, you can download the full project file, including all the samples and effect tracks I used, to play around by yourself or use them in your own productions, with the link in the description. And because I use the splice sample, you don't get the full vocal track, but of course the bounced and sliced sample is part of this project file. And for the processing, I added an auto pan tremolo, just to have a little bit of movement in the vocal slices. And at the end of each vocal section, I increased the amount of the auto pan tremolo to 100% to achieve that stutter effect at the end. Then I added an extra reverb and delay and took out the low frequencies with the EQ, and with the auto filter I automated the high cut in the build-up sections. And the second vocal track is that reversed reverb tail, which is sounding like this. And this one is a very cool technique to build tension for the transition to the next section, and it also introduces the vocals and preparing the listener that vocals coming in the next section. And it's very easy to create that reverb tail. You just need to go to your vocal track where you want that reverb tail from, and then you go to your reverb and set the dry wet all the way to 100 and also increase the decay time to 60 seconds. Then I delete the rest of the vocal slices because I want the reverb only at the beginning of the vocals, and then you can select how long you want your reverb to be, and then you right click and bounce to new track. And that's it. Now you have the reverb bounce to a new track, and then I copy the reverb and press undo until you back to your normal vocal track. Then you can add a new audio track and paste the reverb tail, reverse it, and put it right before your vocal section starts. Then you can lower the volume of the tail by dragging the left corner here until you're happy how the sound came in. And now your reverb vocal tail sounding like this. So a very simple technique, but very effective, and you should use that to introduce your vocals. And the third vocal layer is a variation of the vocal slice, and it's sounding like this. And this is basically a resampled sound from the first vocal slice track, because I liked how the tremolo sound is sounding at the end. And then I resampled that to use that for the third 8 bars here. And that's a nice variation to combine with the call and response technique, but we go through that at the end when we talk about the arrangement. For the processing, I took out some low frequencies and added a delay. And with the auto shift effect, I did that pitch at the end of the vocal chop. And this one is just to have variation, and it sounds very cool. And the way to achieve that is to add the auto shift, and you can automate the formant. Or in my case, I added a LFO on a rate of 2 bars here and linked the LFO to the formant pitch right here. For the FX section, there's also nothing special. I just added a basic sweep up effect and a basic snare roll. For the snare roll, I added a reverb to add more brightness and a shifter to pitch the last few snare notes at the end to get a little extra effect. And the third FX I added here is a crash. And for the processing, I added a delay with a long feedback time and a reverb to have that brightness. And then I took out some low frequencies. And on the FX group, I added another EQ with a low cut, and I modulated the low cut so that we get that nice cutoff effect at the end. And that's already it for the sounds. Let's talk about the arrangement. So the first 8 bars here is a little build-up section, which is sounding like this. And for the build-up, I automated the on and off knob of the auto filter to open the cutoff until the drop starts. For the piano, I automated the gain knob here so that it's more quiet at the beginning and then gets louder until the end of the drop. And I modulated the dry web knob of the delay to get more whiteness at the end. For the vocal slice, I did the same auto filter as for the guitar. So it opens until the drop starts, and I modulated the decay time of the reverb so that we get a nice washed vocal at the end of the build-up. And we talked already about the sweep up and the snare roll. So let's move on to the first section. So for the first 8 bars, we have only the kick and the bass and the guitar playing to have a nice contrast of the very busy build-up. And in the second 4 bars, the clap and the open head coming back in. And I did a little transition here with a reversed kick. At the end of the first 8 bars, we have that reversed vocal we talked before to introduce the vocals and to have a transition to the second 8 bars. So for the second 8 bars, we have that vocal slice and the dreamy piano comes in. And now there's a lot going on. So we have the guitar, we have the piano, and we have the vocal slices. And in this case, the guitar was clashing with the vocal slice. That's why I added a high cut on the guitar to make space for the vocals. So listen to the track when I turn off the auto filter here. So you can really hear the high frequencies of the guitar are too much in this track, and that's why I decided to use the auto filter when the vocals coming in, and then it's sounding like this. So you still have the melody of the guitar, but the focus is more on the vocals and the guitar is not annoying anymore. And at the end of the second 8 bar loops, we have that sweep up, and the sweep up is supported by the 3 crash samples here at the end. And for the last 8 bars, I took out the kicks at the beginning to build a little bit of tension for the listener and have a variation in the low end. And then I did that call and response technique I mentioned at the beginning. So the dreamy piano is the call in this case, and then the guitar sample answer. So the dreamy piano is the call in this case, and the guitar is the response. And only the call and response sounding like this. And because only these both instruments would not fill that section enough, I added that vocal stutter sample we talked before. And in the second 4 bars, the full vocal slice come back in. At the end, we have a sweep up and the snare rolls again. And the full last 8 bar loop sounding like this. And yeah, that's it for the project. So as you can see, simplicity is really key for this kind of genres. Take your time while selecting your sounds, take your time where to position them, and try to make a nice variation every 8 bar loops. And as always, I would love to read your feedback and questions in the comment section. Also let me know which genres or producers I should do next. If you liked this video, make sure you follow me on my socials, hit the subscribe button. That would help me a lot. And if you want to play around with the samples or effect racks I used by yourself, you can download the full project file with the link in the description. And now we listen to the full track. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.